Thank you for the opportunity to be here. If Reverend Rodriguez was here today, he would start by saying, silence is not an option, and you are what you tolerate. And that's precisely why the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference has lent its voice in strong support to the people of Israel, the government of Israel, and to the land of Israel, and to the land that we believe belongs to Israel. Sure. Hispanics love Israel, its people, its culture, its history. We love to sing the songs of Zion. And you see this overwhelming support in the survey, as we just saw. But then there's that number where every now and then might be 25%. Sometimes I think it was maybe 30% where there was an undecided. They didn't know exactly where they stand on the issue. As a pastor, as an evangelist for the last 18 years traveling the country and throughout the nation, please remember that the fastest growing segment of the evangelical community is Hispanic Christians. So something that could be looked into further are how many of these Hispanics that are polled are baby Christians, if you will, that are still being discipled. They're still being taught the faith and taught the values of the Christian faith and being taught the history of Israel. So there's something to be said for that. Also, there's another thing that I think that could be looked at, and it's of those Hispanics that are polled, how many are first-generation immigrants that are coming from countries where you're not necessarily taught that your faith can impact elections or impact the government. For some, this is a very American concept that we take our faith to the voting booth, or as one colleague I heard say, we are to be bilingual. We are to speak the language of heaven and of earth. And my colleague said the language of heaven is prayer and the language of the earth is voting. That's a foreign concept, if you will, for a first-generation immigrant that has come to the United States, where many times they are the extreme minority for their faith. Even to the extent where there's a civil marriage and then a religious marriage, or sometimes they can only get married, and there's just all kinds of nuances that come. I don't want to take too much time because I want to hear Bishop Jackson close this out, and you all amen him and clap for him when he gets done. So there's things that I think there are those parts that need to be considered. Also, Hispanics will always have a heart. North American Hispanics will always have a heart for immigrants and for anyone that they deem a refugee, anyone that they deem displaced or someone without a home. So I think that reflects in that number where we see the concern for our Palestinian brothers and Christians within the region. So, but again, as I said, overwhelmingly, there is this strong support. So what I see is that there needs to be revelation and then reconciliation. The revelation that that these people that we read about in the Bible, whose promises we quote as our own, there is a modern day heritage or lineage that still exists today, that these are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that the same promises that we quote for ourselves and for our children and our children's children actually belong to those people before they belong to us. And then that reconciliation, if you will, of reconciling my faith with my politics, my voting, what I believe about the modern state of Israel. And I close with this, and it's a little bit of a personal analogy, but it's because of the season that we're in. I was invited to go to a Seder for the first time in the spring of 2016. My wife had just been diagnosed with leukemia and given 2 weeks to live. I have 3 young children. And I went to the Seder, and they sang a song called Dayenu, which I'd never heard before. And it's this concept, as probably everyone in this room knows, Dayenu simply means it would have been enough. And as they sang the song, they said, if all he would have done is bring us out of Egypt, Dayenu. If all he would have done is help us cross the Red Sea, Dayenu. If all he would have done is provided in the wilderness, Dayenu. And it was this concept of, if this is all there is, if this is as far as we've gotten, it's been enough. He's been good enough to us. Dayenu. This would have been enough. And in that season of life for my children, my wife, who eventually passed on and went to be with the Lord, that became like, if you will, the theme song of our life. It became that rallying cry of, if all we had was 15 years of marriage, Dayenu. If all we had was till October of 2016, Dayenu. If you know, to value that moment. And again, that's something that was given to us. That was a treasure, if you will. My kids know the concept of Dayenu. They know the song of Dayenu, because we learned that just because of the fellowship that we had with our Jewish brothers and sisters that took time to sit with us, break bread, and teach us Dayenu. They have forever impacted, the Jewish people have forever impacted me and my children, because though we lost, we're able to say Dayenu. He's been enough. And if that's true for myself and for my children, how many more Hispanic evangelicals and African American evangelicals and so many more, how many more can be taught those principles, those promises, and have their lives affected? So I look at the survey, and I don't look at it as concern. I look at it as the opportunity for those that are unsure to learn that there is a God who's been so good to us that if there was nothing else, Dayenu. Thank you very much.